Here is a brief video about Kant and gender-inclusive language. In general, it is of course very important to use gender-inclusive language, and this is as important in philosophy as it is elsewhere. But the history of philosophy poses a special challenge, because here, using inclusive language can in fact be problematic. Most, not all, but certainly most philosophers of past millennia held sexist views of one sort or another. This is not always immediately visible. Authors often use general terms, such as human beings, when articulating their philosophical theories, and this may make it seem that they explicitly include all genders, but often, when you look at what they say about women specifically, it turns out that this is not quite right. I'll illustrate this point with the example of Immanuel Kant, but the point generalizes, since Kant was certainly no exception. So here is an example. In the Metaphysics of Morals, Kant asserts that every human being has an innate right to freedom. He says that this right, quote, belongs to every human being by virtue of his humanity, end quote. Kant further explains that this right includes, among other things, the right to be one's own master. Yet Kant also argues later in the very same book that the natural superiority of men gives a husband the right to command over his wife as her master. He denies all women the right to vote, as well as many other civil rights, subordinating women to men. Now clearly there's a tension here between what Kant says in general about these human rights that humans have by virtue of their humanity, and what he says about the rights of women specifically. But you only see this tension when you look at what he writes about women. And this is a typical phenomenon. Kant is no exception. Now in such cases, what should we do when we write about Kant? This is an important question, but the answer is not easy. For if we take over Kant's general terms or use our explicitly gender-inclusive language of our own, we may inadvertently misrepresent him as more of a gender egalitarian than he really was. For example, if we were to say, based on Kant's description of this human right to be one's own master, that Kant holds that all women have the right to be their own masters, then we get a statement that is false. We should, of course, try to avoid making false statements, and so before we make such inferences, we should look into Kant's views on women. Further, if we want to use Kant's arguments for our own philosophical purposes, then overcoming Kant's sexism in our own theorizing will often require much more than paying attention to our language. We often also need to make adjustments to the theoretical framework. For example, Kant takes for granted the gendered division of labor of his day, and he doesn't problematize it. But it shouldn't be taken for granted. So if we wish to use a Kantian philosophical framework for a theory of labor of our own, we should problematize the gendered division of labor. If we don't, because we let ourselves be guided by what Kant found philosophically important and what Kant found philosophically interesting, then we risk replicating sexist features of his theory in our own work. Unfortunately, there's no easy fix and no one-size-fits-all strategy for dealing with these issues. How you can best deal with Kant's sexism will depend on your topic and on your own aims. For example, when you write about some technical issue related to Kant's philosophy of physics, it may not be immediately relevant. But when you discuss his political theory and his conception of citizenship, then it certainly is relevant. In some cases, you need to discuss Kant's views on gender at length, and in other cases, a footnote may suffice, or you may find some other more creative solution. But the most important thing is to be aware of the problem. Thank you.